There's no place to escape to.
This is the last podcast.
On the left.
the show like that all of a sudden? We are on probably the most serious topic we have ever covered, and you guys want to start by making it sounds as if you're an alien spacecraft made out of hamburger meat.
I spent all week doing work on a network sitcom. I was on Warner Brothers, and this is true. I somehow hurt my throat.
How?
Doing something. But I can't say what it was.
Watch out for Henry Zabrowski on Superstore, where he plays someone who sues the company for sexual harassment. Evidently, I have no idea what happened.
I was used as a toy.
I'm sure.
You know what I don't understand about the way conspiracy theories and like historians write about Lee Harvey Oswald after the fact, right? Where they include all the names. Lee Harvey Oswald is the way it's kind of pitched. I guess it's because an assassin sounds more interesting with 3 names.
Yeah.
But all the people back in the day just call him Lee Oswald. It's way better to be like, well, Lee Oswald, he led the tyranny of his own mind with the silver bullet within the rifle that felled America's greatest hero. And it's like, I just say Lee Harvey Oswald. I don't know why I'm stuck on that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think people put the Harvey in so it makes it seem as if he had a plan. All right, everyone, welcome to the last podcast on the left. I am Ben Kissel, hanging out with Marcus Parks.
Hi, Ben.
And then we have acting superstar on Superstore, Henry Zabrowski. At what point do I give you so many accolades and so much applause that you begin to think I'm making fun of you?
It's already begun. It already feels like that. And we don't know if I'm even going to be on the show. I actually don't even know if I can even say that. We have said it now, so now it's out there. Because I could be cut from the show. Who knows what's going to happen? But it was nice to be with my best friend, Ben Feldman, for a week.
All right, everyone. We are on to JFK Part 3.
Lee Oswald.
Whoa.
So when last we left Lee Harvey Oswald, the president's assassin was living back in Dallas apart from his wife and 2 children, and the friend Marina was staying with had done Oswald a favor by getting him a job at the Texas School Book Depository.
Or was it his double? And was Ruth Payne an occult member of the CIA backstory? I don't know.
Just asking questions.
Now, this job was actually perfect for Oswald because, as opposed to all the other jobs he'd been fired from over the years, he didn't have to actually interact with anyone directly because his only job was to fill book orders up on the 6th floor.
See, that is actually a very good hiring technique. If I worked or owned a restaurant, I would say only vegetarians allowed. They're not going to eat the meat. And so if I had a book depository, I'd say only people who can't read. Because then they're not going to be thumbing through the books. They're going to be doing their job.
You're the single worst businessman who has ever been born. They have to be able to read. It's literally the only thing that they have to do, and they have to eat the meat. Got to see if the meat is spoiled.
No, the meat's not spoiled. We assume it's fresh until we hear otherwise.
But on the other hand, it might just be that Oswald wasn't in the job long enough to fuck it up. Because the day that JFK's limo drove by the Texas School Book Depository was just a little more than a month after Oswald began working there. But during this time, Oswald seemed to make an attempt to turn his life around, even if that attempt was brief and half-hearted. 2 days after getting the job at the depository, Marina threw Oswald a surprise birthday party, where he spent the entire night apologizing for every bad thing he'd ever done over the course of their marriage.
Hey, listen, there's a lot I gotta apologize for, Marina. Obviously,
Lee, I'm sorry, just 1 second. Surprise! It's your birthday! Yes. Anyway, continue. You can continue, though. Yeah.
I just want to say I'm sorry, number one, for my biggest regret is that I ate all the gum that you bought for the house. I know that you bought it for the 2 of us to share, but I'm a gum hound. And I'm also I'm real sorry that I forgot that we were supposed to go to the movies last Tuesday. It's a whole thing.
Well, anyway, here is your cake. Blow out the candles. Okay.
Now, upon moving back to Dallas, Oswald had promised Marina that he wouldn't try to kill General Edwin Walker again.
I promise.
I
went through it. Listen, I know what I went to talk therapy. I understand it's a part of what I have to do is that it's like, yes, just because other people label me small potatoes doesn't mean I need to feel like small potatoes, or actually that I just need to believe and know that my own potatoes are big enough for myself, and that's all that matters. All that matters is how big are my potatoes to me.
Okay, you double dog swear that you're not going to kill the general?
I triple dog swear. Wow. So, yep.
Come on home, baby.
And besides, Oswald's plan had totally backfired because Walker had become even more popular in the interim, specifically because of the assassination attempt.
Well, he did his afterwards. He was like, I ran out there and I chased after that young taut boy. I knew that if I just found my assassin and I applied the secret skills I taught in general school of just filleting the balls, I would get him to confess his crimes.
Sir, it is interesting. Could you just give a physical description of the assassin, please, in like a non-sexual way?
Oh, okay. Slender of cock. I'm sorry, let me start again. He had the most head I've seen on a tiny man.
Okay.
And how long was it after this that Edwin Walker got busted in a sting for trying to buy a blowjob in a public bathroom?
It was the 80s.
The 80s.
That's what he did. He did the long stance, and that's what he got arrested for. And then he asked a cop for a blowjob and gave him money, and I'm pretty certain that person had a badge on.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Also, you can kind of recognize a cop by their mouth.
Yeah.
There is a cop mouth. Just feel like you got to be very aware when talking with someone trying to get a blowjob from them. Uh-huh. If they got sharp teeth, little teeth, but many teeth, and no lips.
Do you think the cop went as far as to start sucking his penis and then be like, I hate to tell you, this is a crime. You're arrested.
Well, that's the thing. Yeah, I feel like the cop should have to put their lips on the cock. Otherwise, we don't have a blowjob now, do we?
We had this same conversation with the Jim Jones episode.
And we will continue to have this conversation until we are done recording, because we need to get to the bottom of this.
And even though Oswald did attend one of Walker's rallies, he probably should have stayed as far away as possible because his trip to Mexico had finally caught him the official attention of the FBI.
With the attention on paper. Now
Yes.
they are starting to send people out again after him because we know that the CIA is watching him, not on paper, because they didn't do anything on paper unless it's invisible ink or some other horseshit involving like squirrels with memos attached to their insides. Just whatever kooky idea the CIA has.
Yes, and of course that was because he went to the Russian embassy and the Cuban embassy. He said, "Let me in," and they said, "No can do."
They said, get the fuck out of here. And the man put in charge of monitoring and investigating Lee Harvey Oswald was Agent James Hosty. And Hosty started interviewing friends and neighbors about Oswald's activities pretty soon after Oswald returned from Mexico City. Now, Agent Hosty did not see Oswald's potential for violence, but that's mostly because everyone he talked to about Oswald downplayed or outright didn't mention just how violent Oswald could be.
Well, it seems like they were covering for them and their domestic violence. They were kind of didn't want anybody in their business, and you had a bunch of weird-ass Russian dissidents all hanging out, mixed with several CIA assets that are also in there that are observing Lee Harvey Oswald. It's a very sticky situation.
When Hosty asked Marina about Oswald, specifically his work on Fair Play for Cuba in New Orleans, she just said that he was young and didn't know what he was doing and was unlikely to pull the same shit in Dallas. And instead of mentioning that her husband was physically abusive and had attempted to assassinate a public figure in Dallas earlier that year, Marina just begged Hosty to not interfere with Oswald's new job at the book depository. The FBI's never gone and looked for Lee Harvey Oswald officially at work.
Until now.
What would they even do? But how would you mess with someone who works at a book depository? Would you just crunkle some pages in a Walt Whitman poem? Like how would you mess with him at his job?
Just to see the FBI bust you, Kissel, as you're adding all the extra goop inside the chicken McNuggets that you were serving to people. What? This is a sting?
Oh, man.
And when Marina told Oswald about the visit from the FBI, he was understandably nervous and agitated. but only told Marina that if they came again, she should write down the make, color, and license number of the agent's car, although I'm not sure what he could have actually done with that information.
He liked notes, and he liked data. He thought that amassing these data points would help him later on with identifying whoever was harassing him or whatever his convoluted side story was.
I do have a feeling as well, he's just so dim-witted that if he felt like he was being followed by the FBI, he'd take 2 right turns and then start following them. And then he'd just be like, and now see? Now I'm following you. And then they're like, this isn't how it works. Get out of the car. And then they could just shoot him whenever they want.
He needs a potted plant costume. Like one of those where he hands aside the pot and then he pops up and he's got a bush on his head.
But when the FBI came back, Marina's housemate, Ruth Payne, just told the FBI that Oswald was an illogical person and a communist, but ultimately harmless. And the 2 women agreed to not tell Oswald about the visit. In response to that first visit, though, Oswald wrote 2 letters. One was sent to the Soviet embassy in Washington, D.C., telling them of his activities in Mexico City and calling the Cuban consul, quote-unquote, stupid for not approving his visa.
They were stupid. They were stupid. You know what else was stupid? The amount of empanadas I was forced to eat. It was like some kind of forced competition on me. And I'd kind of say, I was like, enough with the food. Enough with what you're doing here. Get away from me, Abuelita. I'm already filled up on chips. Now I'm eating 4 empanadas. And now I'm eating all this dessert. And I know you're charging for me. And I don't understand this Mexican money.
You can just see the civil servant who got the letter just be like, put this in the wacko pile.
That's exactly what they did.
That's exactly what they did. The other letter was dropped off at Agent Hosty's office and instructed Hosty to stop bothering Marina and to talk directly to Oswald if he had any questions. And the letter, which was destroyed after Oswald was killed, was at the time dismissed as the rantings of, quote, some nut.
Some nut.
Yikes.
But I think it's interesting how much evidence was destroyed. There was so many pieces of evidence, if you believe the CIA, that they had pictures of Lee Harvey Oswald outside of the Mexican consul that they destroyed. Everybody else saying they destroyed all of this paper trail of all of the people that were having little tabs on Lee Harvey Oswald as he had his misadventures, his international misadventures. And then you start to wonder, at some point, when is it suspicious that you either, number one, were trying to absolve yourself of any sort of, like, we didn't stop him and we had a chance to, or is it some other paper trail where it shows some kind of involvement with Lee Harvey Oswald? The problem is the lack of evidence is what makes it super fucking sketchy.
And don't forget, coming to NBC this Saturday, Now That's Some Nut, starring Sirhan, David Chapman, and Lee Harvey Oswald.
I could see the Pornhub thing where it's just like trying to fill a glass with it. That's some nut.
Hosted by Mark Summers.
Well, because Hosty completely dismissed Oswald as a harmless, if still communist kook, he was suspended without pay following the assassination and was eventually transferred to the Kansas City FBI office, which has a lot less prestige than the Dallas FBI office.
He dropped the ball.
If you watch, there's that new, I think it's called The Monopoly McMillionaires, I think it's called, documentary.
Yeah, it's fucking great.
It's great, but they talked about the head FBI guy, who's a lot of fun in this series, is talking about how he was stationed in Jacksonville and how much it sucked because he's like, nothing happens. There's no action. So they all jumped on this huge story. So I can imagine what it's like sitting in Kansas City, just being like, I hope somebody steals some fucking corn today so we can bust him.
But perhaps the biggest question when it comes to Lee Harvey Oswald and the assassination of John F. Kennedy across the board among both historians and conspiracy theorists is the question of motivation.
Yes.
See, since Lee Harvey Oswald was cut down himself by an assassin's bullet before he got the chance to be interrogated properly, we really don't have a definitive answer as to why Oswald killed the president.
A little too ironic. Yeah, I really do think.
I'm sure we're going to get to what happened there with Mr. Rubenstein, but
Oswald!
But the picture of the sheriff just neoing like he's in the Matrix away from like the total lack of heroic movement from the sheriff. You're just like, wow.
In fact, there is no evidence that Oswald had a specific grudge toward JFK outside of resenting him for his privilege. But on the other hand, that privilege was a product of the capitalist system, and Oswald was a staunch Marxist, so he certainly didn't have warm feelings towards JFK.
Only in America. Only in America can an Irishman be considered privileged.
What are you talking about? JFK was enormously rich.
I know. Very rich. I'm just saying.
What do you mean? What's wrong with being an Irishman?
Yeah, what happened? Where'd that come from?
That was a racist statement against
Holy
Irishmen.
Shit. No, I was the anti-Irish one.
You're not Irish, number one. You're just a leprechaun. Marcus, he just had lunch today, so he's got a lot of energy. No, what I am saying is the Irish historically have not been treated well, but you come to America and you can be president. Yes, you will be shot, but you can be president of these great states.
Are you about to start the there were actually more white slaves than black slaves argument?
Well, if you think about it.
Well, the most evidence we have is a letter that Oswald wrote to Kennedy's brother Robert in 1959 from Moscow. In that letter, Oswald said, quote,
"In the event of war, I would kill any American who put a uniform on in defense of the American government. Any American. Even Dick Van Dyke. I'll shoot the teeth out of his mouth, one huge tooth at a time." Have you seen that Dick Van Dyke pro Bernie video? He looks like the preacher from the Poltergeist, I think, 3.
Yeah, he's 94 years old. Okay, he's doing for a chimney sweep. He's living pretty long. He never got any lung cancer or anything.
He looks like a skeleton that someo's pasted a whole bunch of teddy bear stuffing onto.
We'll see how we look if we get to be 94.
But specific to JFK, that statement that Henry just read was not. Now, as we get closer to November 22nd in this timeline, motivations might become a little more clear. But as far as a definitive answer goes, I'm afraid that what we're looking for died with Oswald.
God. This is why it's frustrating, though, right?
Yeah, well, of course.
There's a very interesting op-ed from the LA Times from 4 years ago by James Reston that talks about one theory he had was that actually the true victim inside the car, if we believe in the lone nut theory, that the person that Lee Harvey Oswald did have motivation to kill was Connolly, the governor of Texas, that was in the car, because in a journal that was released, and during that big, I think it was in 2016, they released all of the formerly classified files. They did this big release, and one of them was a journal that Lee Harvey Oswald had, and on it, it said, it had a list of people that he was going to kill. It said, "I will kill," and it said James Hosty, Edwin Walker, Richard Nixon, and then John Connolly, and then next to John Connolly, he drew a dagger with blood drops dripping from it. That's his doodle. Wow. So it's a theory of what if he showed up to kill the governor, instead killed the president in the biggest Mr. Magoo meets fuck Oliver Stone bullshit that ever happened.
And you're accusing me of being anti-Irish, and you're sitting here saying, oh, Kennedy's head was so big that it just blocked out an entire body of a governor. It's ridiculous what you've just said, Henry, and I think we're going to have to take it to the apology tour.
But before we get to the day itself, let's explore the background of the unfortunate victim in this whole saga to demonstrate just how many people JFK had pissed off in his first term, and why Dallas in particular was a dangerous place for the president.
It is pretty ballsy that he showed up in fucking Dallas. Honestly, he's not asking for it.
No.
But he didn't do a lot to prevent it.
Yeah.
No. Now, the scuttlebutt over the years has been that JFK's father, Joe Kennedy, was wrapped up with the mob during the days of Prohibition, and that the mob helped JFK get elected. I mean, a lot of people take, like Joe Kennedy was involved with the mob. People take that as fact. However, there is no credible link made between the Kennedys and the Italian mafia. And it is the consensus amongst respected historians that this was indeed a myth.
Shade. Yeah. Throne.
Somewhere David Icke just got a chill down his spine.
I am respected.
Well, these stories came mostly from former mobsters trying to sell books in their old age. And in one case, a story came from a 93-year-old piano tuner who said he once saw Kennedy come over to Al Capone's house for a spaghetti dinner.
Wait a second. You could just have a job as a piano tuner?
Dude, piano tuner, they had their own union.
Yeah, that was a big
all
deal.
they did was tune. When was America so musical? Is that what happened?
Used to have purity, where people used to sit and spin yarns at each other, and then sit, and someone would play a piano, and everyone would sing the standards at the time instead of everybody sucking each other's feet, playing with each other's assholes, and these big sexual parties that we have now.
That was just the Bill Murray Christmas special you described in both scenarios.
But no matter what the truth is, once Kennedy got into office, he appointed his brother Robert as Attorney General and instructed him to take down the mob, which resulted in an 800% increase in organized crime convictions.
Yeah, we got to take care of that mob, see, because they got a terrible series of accents. Unlike us, the Kennedys.
It's an accent.
Because our accents are great.
They are something.
I'm working, man. I have an entire month left of these shows to work on this accent.
Absolutely. And again, you're going to want to check out Henry on Superstore. He's great.
We don't know if I'll make it.
And again, that's convictions. An 800% increase in convictions, which means the increase in arrests must have been astronomical.
Well, you just leave a pile of spaghetti behind a dumpster, and you can at least get one fucking mobster to crawl back there. Hey, look at that. It's free spaghetti. Nice. And then you just drop a cage on him.
All of our Italian listeners are like, they get one more joke before we're going to the studios. Like, they're just... But I relate to our Italian listeners. I just bought 4 velour suits. I'm wearing my velour shirt today.
Oh, wow.
It's very warm, so I understand they got good fashion, and I like the Italian people.
Yeah, you're wearing nothing but Muppet now.
That's it, baby.
See, JFK and RFK rightly believed that organized crime was a much bigger threat to America than communism.
Sure.
And they redirected the FBI accordingly.
Well, it depends on what you mean by the type of crime. It depends on what you mean by important. The mafia fucks with the government's money because they don't pay taxes. That's why they're a bigger target. Communists just eat soup and form big groups. I don't know what the hell they do. I didn't know what was so dangerous what they were doing in America at the time. America was under a capitalism. They weren't flipping. They weren't owning the methods of production. They were just yelling at people with homemade megaphones. The mafia weren't paying taxes.
Well, weren't paying taxes and were also involved in quite a few illegal activities that resulted in the death and misery of thousands.
Hey, man, sometimes some eggs. They get cracked, baby.
And
gotta
of course,
make them omelets.
And of course, the communists were responsible for the great soup shortage of 1943. And I think we need to hold them accountable for all of these starving children that didn't get their soup at night.
Well, this refocus from communism to the mafia didn't sit well with FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover.
And he already was not sitting well with the thong he was wearing. This is fun. Having fun today.
Well, Hoover absolutely believed that communism was the biggest threat that America had ever seen. And he continued to believe that throughout the years until he was eventually removed from the post. With that, Kennedy made not one, but 2 very powerful enemies, the mafia and J. Edgar Hoover.
Damn.
And also in the intelligence world, JFK was in the process of dismantling the CIA because he believed that they had too much power.
Yep.
And in doing so, JFK made powerful enemy number 3.
if you read, there's a very interesting book called JFK and the Unspeakable that I think that we are going to use as a main source when we start deeper and deeper into our conspiracy episodes 5 and 6. The author James Douglas he's a theologian who he's a little bit in love with Kennedy, and he paints him in a very, very positive light. But he really does break down how the CIA, truthfully, how dangerous the CIA was at the time, and how deeply Kennedy was fucking them, because they had worked their way completely inside of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and they were the main, in terms of intelligence, they were one of the main advisors for the president for domestic and non-domestic issues, and so they had a lot of control for many, many years. So especially at this point, they were doing a lot of horseshit. They were already flipping governments in Africa and doing a bunch of shit outside of the CIA. And so what Kennedy was just straight up saying, he pulled them out of the White House, he cut their budget, he then said the terms, I'm going to rip the CIA up into 1,000 pieces and throw them in the air. And he said that, and that made them incredibly mad. And under under Dulles, the one of the spookiest of the spooks, they were there's a very, very bad enemy to have.
Yeah, no one wants to be told that they're going to be turned into confetti.
No.
The FBI, the CIA, and the Mafia.
Yep.
Oh!
And that's not all. Extending from the CIA's animosity, JFK had also drawn the ire of Cuban exiles because of his failure to remove Castro from power during the Bay of Pigs invasion. And the Cuban exiles were all trained by the CIA, and they were all here in America and heavily armed and well-trained.
Think about this. You got full-on assassination groups. Operation 40, Alpha 66. They were in the southern United States of America. They were a mixture of wackadoos, CIA trainers, and just guys with guns that they had trained ready to go and invade Cuba. And they were ready. They had their fucking balls full of it. They're so ready to go. And then JFK essentially fires all of them. And now you have these trained people that are upset with nothing to do, just in Texas, hanging out.
Just hanging out.
In Florida and Louisiana.
New Orleans, that whole fucking network. You just have all these, straight up guys that already are working outside the normal bounds of the government and law enforcement that are now just all blue-balled, and they got to do something with that energy.
Yeah, indeed. They definitely need to shoot. So when it comes to him, if I was JFK's chief of staff, I'd be like, you gotta befriend someone. Just go down to a roller rink and just get yourself a group of 15-year-olds that follow you. You need to have some friends in this world.
Ben, he did have a friend.
Who?
The American people.
Yeah, buddy.
Because,
well, not all of them.
No, not all. I'm pretty sure all of those people we just listed were also Americans, but
yes.
All right.
Okay, the American public, sir.
The Catholics. Who are strong.
Because he's also a Catholic. And so the president has a boss then.
The Pope.
Then the president's got to go talk to the...
We'll get to all that here in a second before you start.
I don't know if we can vote for this Kennedy guy, Henry. I think he's going to be led by the Pope.
I think we got to get rid of this Kennedy.
If this whole thing concludes with us killing Kennedy.
Well, finally, Kennedy was also de-escalating the war in Vietnam, which would have meant billions in lost profits to arms manufacturers like Lockheed Martin and chemical manufacturers like Dow, who made hundreds of thousands of tons of napalm for the government between 1965 and 1969. A lot of people made a paycheck off of Vietnam.
Yep.
Anybody that has a full water tower of napalm, I try to, be a friend, too. I try to take him out to coffee, drop some donuts by, being like, how's the napalm? Still contained? Great. Great. We need to use that on somebody. You start, butting up to them, saying, all this napalm just sitting here is kind of going to waste. We should do something with that.
And there you had enemies 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and so on and so forth when you count all the businesses that were poised to make billions of dollars on the deaths of over 58,000 Americans and as many as 2 million Vietnamese civilians. Then there was the American public. Kennedy's election in 1960 was among the closest in history, but Kennedy pulled it off by narrowly defeating the man who served President Eisenhower as his VP for the previous 8 years, Richard Nixon.
because he was ugly.
You think so, huh?
No,
Yep.
you know that.
I know.
Yeah.
No, Nixon just didn't want to be a pussy, so he didn't want to wear makeup. That's true.
Yeah.
He
And
literally
he
didn't want to wear
looked-
makeup, and then he just looked like a sweating pig.
Yeah, well, he
Yeah, he
also
looked like
hadn't
shit.
shaved that day. He had 5 o'clock shadow.
He
Yeah.
literally thought television was a fad.
He looked like a man in trouble for something. Like he owed money to a bookie. You don't want a man sweating like he has the coronavirus on national television during
No.
your first televised debate.
Although, interestingly enough, people who listened over the radio, they said that Nixon won and Kennedy lost, and then obviously vice versa when you get to see that beautiful, big Catholic head.
But hey, that's another enemy right there. And you do not want Richard Nixon as an enemy.
No, he just sits and stews and stews and stews.
Hey, man, sometimes a small man has to sit and think. Because I'll tell you what, Richard Nixon, Lee Harvey Oswald, nothing makes a small person more upset than never being perceived as dangerous, which then makes you have to be extra dangerous.
Extra, yes.
Well, part of the reason why this election was so close was because even though JFK was a war hero with legislative experience, he was, as you two have already pointed out, still a Catholic.
And he's
Cultist.
beholden to the Pope.
Yes, and some Americans did think that he'd be reporting to the Pope before reporting to the American public.
Just 1 second here. Mr. Pope, can you stop having sex with all those kids? The President of the United States is on the line.
Give me 1 minute. Here you go. You take it alone or not? Better get out of here, you sweet. You don't like this? You're upset by this?
That's the Pope. Henry is just articulating the reality of the world we live in.
I'm making it come.
He's been making the come. I don't know why the Pope sounds like that, but
I don't even know if the Pope was Italian at this point.
I don't even know if the Pope was alive.
We had a Pope.
We had a Pope.
That's what I've been told.
It was Johnny Rockets 1. Love that guy.
Great restaurant, Shane.
Well, even though Kennedy's approval ratings were at 58% when he died, which is pretty good as far as approval ratings go,
Absolutely.
the people who didn't like him absolutely loathed him. In addition to believing that Kennedy's religion was a liability, many also believed that he was a closet communist because he didn't take a hard enough stance against Russia and the other so-called red elements here at home.
Well, the stuff that really fucked with him, especially on the inside, was that he had which was semi-secret, he had a backdoor channel to Khrushchev, and they were speaking to each other, trying to negotiate all these various massive, huge, international things that they set up at each other, and then they would kind of talk each other back, and they were very, very mad that he didn't want to go and stomp out all the communists in Laos and all the communists in Vietnam. They believed that any sort of coexistence was a failure versus just obliterating them.
There's not nearly as much money in diplomacy as there is in war.
God, no.
So that does not help him at all.
Well, there weren't too many critics louder about JFK's supposed communist ties than the Dallas Morning News, which is still the biggest newspaper in the second largest state in the Union.
The Dallas Morning News, it's messed up in many ways. Skip Bayless is the worst sports commentator of all time. That's where you got to start. I've got a bone to pick with Dallas Morning News. Also, who wakes up early in Dallas?
Dallas Morning News, it's there.
It's a paper.
Yeah, it's a paper. The Dallas Morning News printed biased article after biased article, vitriolic column after vitriolic column. So many that following the assassination, people called up the Dallas Morning News to ask them, "Are you fucking happy now?"
Jeez.
Because they thought that the Dallas Morning News was responsible for fomenting this hatred for the president.
I mean, to be fair, they did have the headline, Kennedy assassinated, but with an exclamation mark. And I
Kennedy
thought that
assassinated.
was Kennedy assassinated, which I thought that was a little rude.
Now, back then, Texas was actually a blue state because the flip from Democrat to Republican by racists the country over due to the passing of the Civil Rights Act had not yet occurred. That was 1964. And of course, Nixon's Southern strategy had not yet been put into play. That meant that Texas was going to be extremely important if JFK wanted to win re-election in 1964. So, in the autumn of 1963, the administration planned what was essentially an early campaign tour consisting of 5 Texas cities in 2 days.
That is a lot of Texas cities in 2 days. Texas is freaking big. Every time we tour there, it's amazing how long you drive and you're still in Texas.
They were ripping through it, and it probably speaks to some of the weird security lags that were happening during his trip.
Right.
Now, San Antonio, Houston, and Austin weren't really seen as problem cities on JFK's tour. But Dallas-Fort Worth, with its contingent of right-wing Kennedy haters like General Walker, was seen as a highly dangerous place for the president. It was seen as such a risk that LBJ's planned speech for Austin was supposed to end with the line, "And thank God, Mr. President, that you came out of Dallas alive."
Honestly, dude, it does seem like he was calling it.
Yeah, did LBJ scratch it, though? Because he's like, that's way too serious because he's not going to come out of it alive? Or Jesus Christ. You know LBJ, well, I don't want to say that he planned the whole thing while holding his cock pissing in the backyard of the White House, but he did do that a lot, and he came up with a lot of his ideas holding his own Johnson.
Is it planning or is it magical thinking?
I don't know.
But JFK saw these warnings as exaggerations, saying that no president should ever be afraid to visit an American city. And really, JFK was actually right, at least about the specific warnings he'd been given. See, the right-wing elements in Dallas were all talk and no action when it came to people actually in power, because right-wing extremists, such as, for example, Timothy McVeigh, are usually cowards who prey on easier targets.
Bad company.
Bad company. But Timothy McVeigh also, it's sending a message is what they were doing. It wasn't, that's the idea, is that whatever you do, the explosion is supposed to do a thing that shows the world that you really mean what you're trying to do.
But it's still preying on innocent people.
Like, of course.
There's no real risk. They're still killing, how many children? 23? Something like that?
I'm going to say this. Enough. They killed enough. And, of course, listen to our Oklahoma City bombing series if you want to learn more about Timothy McVeigh and all the mistakes and just fuckery that his life was.
Mm-hmm. But that's not to say that the right-wing element didn't try to intimidate the president. In preparation for the visit, one of General Walker's henchmen printed up an Old West-style reward poster featuring JFK's front and side profiles, along with the words, "Wanted for treason," and planned to hang the posters along JFK's parade route.
Now, as a country with free speech, you should be technically allowed to do this form of art, right? You are threatening the president, but at the same time, you should be allowed to express themselves. It's just weird how when everybody's all getting drummed up, you can feel the violence just building in the city. Like, just the violent thought in general is starting to get more and more intense. We're seeing it now more than ever.
I just feel like it was a better time for the protest because you actually had to go to not even the Kinko's. I don't even know where the hell you print off a bunch of posters that say wanted for treason. Now you just send a meme. Yeah, you just go to the printers. Yeah. But now you just send the memes. You sit on your couch. This guy had to get out there and find a graphic designer before
it's a whole
thing.
You had to put the plates together. It's very, very intense. Now anybody could just call the president a fucking Cheeto and then they act like they're Martin Luther King.
That's #brave, though.
Now, when it came to that parade route, the majority of JFK's security was ironically placed at the beginning of the planned path at Love Field and the end where JFK was supposed to make a speech at a huge convention center called the Trade Mart.
And he really wanted to get to Love Field because of all those spread-eagled women that I guess are planted there?
Yeah, I'm not sure why they named it that, but
it's named after a guy whose last name is Love.
I would assume it wasn't because of the spread-eagled women that were planted there, because also they would just be dead, and then, yes, I know. Marcus, our audience is smart enough to know when Henry is telling a joke. They don't actually think it's like Hugh Hefner's Bizarre Human Garden.
No, it was right actually across the street from Pussy Hole Grotto, which was awful. And that was a Polish cemetery because what they do is they bury them with their butts outside of the soil because they also have a place to park their bikes. Come on.
You happy with yourself, Henry?
No. I am mad. I'm mad at me. I struggle all the time with the fury I have at myself.
Parking your bike inside of a corpse's butt, huh? What a show.
Now, both Love Field and the Trade Mart were places that were wide open with little cover. So the Secret Service was focused on providing security for those two places. Although they probably did that because providing security in between those two places was almost impossible. See, the path between Love Field and the Trade Mart was a huge circuitous trek through downtown Dallas, which would allow tens of thousands of Dallasites to see the president, but would also take him past hundreds of buildings and thousands of windows. And since the route was laid out in mid-November and the visit was planned for the 22nd, there wasn't enough time for the Secret Service to properly secure each and every building, and definitely not each and every window.
It's interesting now because when you see a president come through town, as we've seen multiple times, like when Obama was in California when we were there, they shut down half of the city.
Yeah.
If Trump goes anywhere, they shut down half of the city. It is a colossal pain in the ass, but they are totally overcompensating almost for what happened here.
Yeah.
I feel like the president's more isolated than ever before. Now that they have, they got the Beast stationed in various places. There's many different versions of the limo that's supposed to carry the president around. It's stationed all over the country. I don't think they have a lot of opportunities to go and actually touch the flesh of the people. But that's what JFK wanted. He wanted to literally touch the people. When they came out of the plane, when they first landed at Fort Worth, people were literally on them, and they were like touching and old school, like kissing babies, which they should not have let JFK done because that mouth was in a lot of places.
Yeah, no, it's not good.
Well, besides that, no American president had ever been killed at a long distance at that point in history, and had never even been shot at by anything other than a pistol. We'd had 3 presidents die from the assassin's bullet at that point.
Who do we got? We got the Lincoln.
We got Lincoln, Garfield, and McKinley.
Ah, that's right, McKinley.
Yeah, you forget about McKinley, don't you?
And Garfield was killed on a Monday.
Isn't that sad? Isn't that weird?
No, because it was up close killings, right?
Yeah,
it was that
all
they're
up
in a
close.
crowd and someone just puts a gun essentially in their belly and shoots them in the chest.
Yeah, and Teddy Roosevelt had also been shot and famously still gave the speech afterwards. And Franklin Roosevelt was shot at, but the assassin instead hit the mayor of Chicago, who was standing right next to him, and the mayor of Chicago did die.
Well, you know.
And then we don't.
You fly too close to the sun. You fly too close to the sun, you might get shot.
And Reagan was shot famously as well, and he lived.
By Hinckley. And Gerald Ford was almost shot by Squeaky Fromme. We all forget about that one.
I try not to. But JFK had a credible assassination attempt in Chicago 3 weeks before this. They had stopped a guy with guns that was on his way to kill the president and had to stop. So it is interesting to see how it was in the air almost.
Yeah. I mean, getting killed from a long distance, it was certainly a concern, but there was not a precedent just yet. And concerning that route, on November 19th, all the Dallas newspapers published a detailed map of the president's upcoming parade path to ensure that as many people as possible could find a spot to come see the president drive by.
So stupid. They also they made the same mistake with Reagan. They were like, this is where he's going to be if you want to shoot him.
Well, some people do actually think that the Dallas newspapers were encouraging things maybe a little bit. Maybe.
It was the free ammo night. The night before that was most suspicious.
I remember that whole series they did called Imagine an America Without Kennedy.
Well, actually, the day that Kennedy got there, the Dallas Morning News did print a story that said, "Welcome, President Kennedy." And when Kennedy saw it, he was actually like, "Oh, wow, this is actually a nice surprise." And then he found out it was sarcastic. It was a full list of all the things that they hated him for and all the things that he'd done wrong.
Okay.
But who should have their interest piqued by that parade map but Lee Harvey Oswald?
Oswald!
I mean, they did all of the research for him. right? You know, he just had to look at it, and in his mind, he's like, I'm figuring this entire parade route out. And it's like, yeah, because they told you every single step of the way where he's going to be.
I tell you what, I know his every move. I know every turn he's going to make. I know what car he's driving, and I know what he looks like. I've seen a picture of him several times today.
Wow, you're really good at this, huh?
Yeah, yep, yes.
It's most likely that Oswald didn't even see the map until November 20th because Oswald only bought day-old newspapers because that's what he could afford. Day-old newspapers were cheaper.
So,
yeah, dude. Then you get
there's something about that that's very sad.
You get extra marinated news. Why get it when it just comes out? Get it a couple of days afterwards so you can really let it have time to sit.
Sure. I mean, I guess, though, probably plays into his idea of, like, being smarter than.
Yeah,
if you're always reading yesterday's news, you're like a time traveler.
I knew that.
I know what happens.
I know what happened yesterday, that's for certain.
The amazing thing about this was that when you go off Lee Harvey Oswald's actions between November 20th and the assassination, we can surmise that he made the decision to kill the president over the course of roughly a day and a half. Now, it's only speculation at this point. Quite possible that Oswald would never have even thought about killing Kennedy had the motorcade not gone directly under his place of work.
Yeah, if he had to travel, he wouldn't have been able to because he was fucking broke. He was stacking books in a basement. He couldn't leave if he wanted to. The assassin's target had to come to him.
Yeah.
He's just that lazy. And I'm sure we'll get to this in the conspiracy episodes and stuff, but he did just get this job.
Yeah, about a month before.
This is pretty coincidental. We'll get to that, I'm sure.
This is the stuff that it drives me fucking up the wall with reading this shit. Because eventually you're just like, man,